I hate that. I don't want someone to give up on the wonderful hobby or even profession of painting because they thought they didn't have any talent, when really what was happening was... Hi everyone, welcome back to Rachel's Studio. I'm so excited to share this tutorial today, and it's not just about painting a horse's eye. I want you to know that if you learn the basic tenets of painting, and my tenets are for Dreamy Realism, that's what I focus on. So when you learn my basic foundational, I don't want to say rules, but the things that I follow, the ways that I paint, when you learn those basic rules and formulas for painting Dreamy Realism, you can paint anything. But if you watch any of my tutorials, you're going to know how to look at a reference photo and interpret it and recreate what you're seeing in the reference. You don't have to have a tutorial specific to painting this certain subject or that certain subject when you know how to follow the basic rules of painting, the basic techniques. So what I'm going to show you is some footage from my real-time tutorial that I did for my Patreon students. And I'm going to share with you my introduction because I talk about so many basic fundamentals, especially beginners need to understand, like the importance of choosing a good reference and how to choose what to paint, how to learn faster, how to set yourself up for success before you even start painting. And then we're going to learn a lot of techniques in this video too, because I'm going to show you all the footage of me painting the eye. You can also join my Patreon for free, and I will create a free post to my free members on Patreon of this downloadable free line drawing of this horse, so that if you want to try your hand at painting it, even if you're not ready to pay for the higher level of watching the real-time start to finish tutorial, you can get the line drawing and the reference for free if you join my Patreon. So I would love to see you there. And you can also join my website for free if you'd like to keep in touch with me in case Patreon ever goes away, which is rachelstudio.com. And you can join my Facebook group for free, where you can post your painting and get feedback from me and my members if you ask for it. That's one of my rules. We don't give feedback or criticism or pointers unless someone asks for them. But if you would like to share your art and your journey on my Facebook group, it's free, and I'd love to see you there. And we learn so much from each other. I learn from my members on Facebook, and they learn from me, hopefully. You can also keep more in touch with me there. My community tab here on YouTube is also another way to stay in touch with me, so I hope you go check out my community tab. I post over there a lot as well. I think I've gotten through all the nitty-gritty basics. There we go. Hello everyone, welcome back to Rachel's Studio. It feels so good to be back with you all after a bit of a break. And I guess I needed it because when I came back after my break, I just felt so reinvigorated, and it just seemed so easy to paint this horse. I don't know if it's because of the break or what, but everything just flowed so beautifully when I came back to the studio well rested. So I'm so excited to be back, and I'm excited about this painting, and we're gonna learn so much. I learned so much from painting this wild pony. And by the way, thank you to Boy in Bristol on Pexels.com for this really beautiful reference photo. Love it. All right, let's talk about some nuts and bolts of how to use video, how to use YouTube and all that before we move into the tutorial. Just remember, if you want to speed me up or slow me down, you can hover over the gear icon. Usually it's in the lower right corner. Sometimes it's up in the upper left or upper right corner. And you can click on that, click on the gear icon, and you can speed me up or slow me down. Also, at the end of the session, if you're on a smart device anyway, you will be able to click on the next video because I embed it in the end of each video. So if you've been having problems getting to the next session, when I have several sessions in a tutorial like the leopard tutorial, which I did make a playlist for that one because there were so many sessions. But if you have a problem with that, just know that if you go to the end of the video and click on the next session, you can just click right into the next tutorial. So I hope that helps you. Also remember, there's two ways to find tutorials. You can go to patreon.com/RachelStudio, and on that page, there's a little cut in the middle of the page. You can click on collections, and then that will take you to all the tutorials I've done. Sometimes it takes a while for them to load, but like you can go to cats or Rachel's favorites or beginner oriented or advanced, flowers, etc., etc. My tutorials are divided up by different kinds of categories there. So that's one way to find out of 200 tutorials I have about 200 tutorials in my library, some better than others, by the way. But anyway, the other way, the old-fashioned way, is to go on my rachelstudio.com website, where I have the Patreon index. So that's rachelstudio.com/Patreon index. And then you can look through that, and the newer, and in my opinion, the better and newer ones are at the top. And as you go down, they get harder or worse and older. So as you go down, and it takes a while for that page to load too. So just give it some time, because it will take a little bit of time to load. But that's way number 2 to find a tutorial. And you are always welcome to message me. Don't be shy about messaging me and asking me to suggest a tutorial to you based on what you're interested in. It can be hard to find just the right tutorial because there's 200 of them now. So I don't mind helping you out with that. Nope, my computer is right here off screen and it's going to sleep. So I need my notes. I'm trying not to ramble for you guys. All right. Okay. I also want to give you a word of encouragement, which if you follow me, you've heard me say this over and over again. Beauty takes time. And especially if you're a beginner, it's a very common, one of the most common beginner's mistake is to doubt your abilities, which I get. And so you get to the ugly stage in the painting and you think that you've ruined it, or you've lost control, or it's just not going right. It's so ugly. Why is it so ugly? Well, that's because every painting goes through an ugly stage. It's totally normal. And it's totally normal to panic. I panic. I still panic. When was the last video tutorial I panicked on? I feel like it's almost everyone. A painting goes through an ugly stage. Oh, this girl swimming, I was totally panicking. I really had to work hard to pull that one together. That one really worked me hard. But if you stick with the process and stick with me and watch the tutorial all the way to the end, you may be surprised at how an ugly painting really pulls together when you do the final stage of the painting, which is where you balance the values and you put in the details. You've got to work through that stage. So worry less about overworking a painting and worry more about underworking a painting. That's the much more common problem that beginners have. They underwork paintings, not overwork them. Us more experienced painters, yes, we do overwork paintings, but usually beginners get scared at the ugly stage and quit too soon. So don't quit, stick with me, watch the tutorial to the end, and I would suggest, the way that I would suggest that you work my tutorials is not try a paint by numbers approach to painting, because painting, if you're trying to get to the level of having dreamy realism, you want to do real art or whatever that means, you want to make beautiful paintings, it becomes a game more not of skill and techniques. It becomes more of a skill of problem solving and strategizing, and it's a thinking game. So if you try to follow me step by step in my painting process, you're not going to learn the number one most important skill in painting, which is learning how to think. You've got to think through your problems. So I think the better way to use my tutorials is watch the whole thing all the way through, or watch a section, like watch a 30-minute session and then try it on your own, and then maybe watch the tutorial again when you can actually understand what I'm talking about because you just had that experience. That might be a more effective way to learn. So that is what I would suggest, because I think that if you try to follow me brushstroke for brushstroke with my techniques of dreamy realism, which is a looser style, a harder to control style, a lot of the things that happen in my painting happen because I let the watercolor do its thing. And every time I do a painting, it's going to do a different thing. And you have to learn to respond to your watercolor as it does its thing, and each painting is going to do something different, so you have to respond differently every time. So what I hope you learn from me, more than paint this hair here and paint that hair there, is you learn how to respond to your paintings. I give you all kinds of fixing techniques, erasing, lightening, darkening, responding to what your painting is doing, and I try to teach that part of the painting process so that you can respond to your paintings if you were indeed trying to be a loose, more dreamy style painter. You got to learn how to respond to your own painting. And if you follow me word for word, stroke for stroke, you're going to get really frustrated really fast. Your painting's going to do something totally different. So that's what I would suggest, is watch the whole tutorial or watch it in sections and then do yours and then maybe watch mine again. And I would also suggest if you've been painting 20 years like me, I would even suggest you paint something more than twice or more than once. The more you paint something, the more you're going to learn how to do that painting. And really it takes one time to do a painting to really understand the image. And then you can paint it a second time and usually apply what you learned and have a lot better outcome, and you will learn so much. That's the best way to learn really fast. So in the tutorial, if you're wondering what to do in a certain area, I would suggest before you even look at what I did, look at the reference and see what the reference tells you to do. I chose a good reference, and if you follow the reference even loosely, get the eyeliner around the eyes dark, the muzzle is a beautiful color, the eyes are a pretty color. If you follow that, then you'll have a good painting. So look to your reference as much as to me, if not more, to teach you how to paint this horse. Okay? The other thing is painting takes time. And the reason is because it's such a thinking intensive activity that if you try to paint for 3 hours straight, you're going to be exhausted physically and mentally because you've got to think a lot, especially if you're learning how to paint. You're going to get exhausted. I usually paint at most 30 minutes at a time, then I take a break. So I usually let a painting unfold at its natural pace over the series of several days at least. Sometimes a month I need that. And so don't try to rush the process. Sometimes you need to let a painting rest, sleep on it, and come back and see with fresh eyes what you think it needs then. So give it the time it needs. Like Georgia O'Keeffe said, to see takes time, to create takes time, beauty takes time. Another thing related to what I just said, your painting's not going to look like my painting. Not with this style that I'm trying to teach, which is loose and dreamy, because everybody's painting is going to look different. And I think that's really cool because your style will emerge as you paint with me and learn the basic tenets and foundations of painting that you will learn with me. You can then apply that and create your own style. So your style will emerge faster painting your way and the way I just suggested, which is watch the tutorial and then try to do it on your own, and also look at the reference as much as to me to figure out what you want to do with your painting. And I'm just here to give you the techniques and also the ways to respond to your painting. Another tip for success, especially to my beginners, is worry way less about getting your colors exactly like mine and worry a lot more about getting your values important. You can paint the sky green, and if you get it the right value in relation to the elements of the land in your painting and whatever else you put in your painting, if you get all the values balanced in relation to each other, then your painting's going to look realistic. It's not the colors that matter, it is the values, the lights, the mediums, and the darks. So just keep that in mind when you're painting with me. I almost said when you're coloring with me. When you're painting with me, pay more attention to colors. And so you don't have to have my exact tube of Holbein opera. You don't have to have my exact tube of Holbein Pyrrole transparent orange. You just want to focus more on getting your values correct, and also your edges, and get your drawing right. And we'll talk about drawing and tracing and all that in a minute. So worry more about values and not colors. Okay, let's talk about why I chose this particular image. And this is another foundation for success for those of you who are beginners to art out there, to help you get into the art mindset. If you're trying to go in the direction of a certain style, like Dreamy Realism, for example, what you want to do to set yourself up for success is not just try to paint any old picture, like your cute picture of Sparky where he's sitting up like this and it's your favorite memory and isn't he so cute? but the lighting is bad, the position is awkward, maybe the picture's a little fuzzy. It's not a good reference. It's a good memory, but it's not a good reference. A better way to go about beginning a painting in my mind is start with an artistic goal. My artistic goal for this painting was very clear, and that is to build on my most popular video pretty much of all time, I think, that I did about Charles Reed and his tip to rely on local color as the foundation for a successful painting design instead of relying on contrast as and his words, not mine, as a crutch. Now, lots of artists and lots of accomplished artists, in fact, Zbukvich would argue that it is contrast that makes a strong painting, and if you look at all his paintings, he relies a lot on contrast to make his paintings really bold and beautiful. So does Thomas Schaller. Thomas Schaller, in almost every single painting, it's all about a big, bold, dark shape juxtaposed against lighter shapes and other lighter and more colorful things going on in the painting. So there are many roads to a masterpiece. One road is to use bold contrast. Another road is to use beautiful light. That's what I did for many years, and I still do that, and I still love doing that, is to just find a reference with beautiful light and just copy those values and colors exactly, and you'll get an amazing painting. So bold contrast, one way, one road. Another road is beautiful light. Another way might be a strong abstract design underpinning the whole painting. Again, Thomas Schaller just did a painting like that where there were really bold, strong shapes sprinkled throughout the painting. And if he would have taken away the realism and just made them bold shapes with beautiful colors and contrast in the shapes, it still would have been a beautiful painting. So that's what I mean by that. That's another road. But the road that I wanted to try taking to a, maybe not masterpiece, but a well done painting is to rely on local color instead of strong contrast, which is something I do a lot, or really beautiful light. Or another road that I often take, and you all know this, is because I'm an animal painter, I rely on having a compelling eye that really draws you in, or eyes, if the animal's looking straight at you, make the eye strong, and everything else will fall together. If you have strong eyes that people ooh and ah over, people will love your painting. Another way you can have strong painting is by using a lot of color theory and make the colors really beautiful and vibrate together. So that's another road. I'm thinking of these off the top of my head as I go. But we're going to rely on interesting, strong local color to hold all the other elements of design of our painting together. So what is local color? Local color is the actual color of a thing when it's not affected by light or shadow. Okay, let me say that again. Local color is the actual color of a thing. Think a yellow lemon, a blue sky, a pink flower. It's the actual color of a thing without that color being affected by the shadows on it or the light shining on it. So if a light shines on a lemon, part of the lemon will look white where the sun is hitting it really strong. Part of it will look like a gray-orange in the shadow, right? And then in the middle, in the midtones of the lemon, it will be still the local color. So Charles Reed talks about using local color and relying on that. So how do you even do that? And so to choose my reference image to make a full circle back to choosing what you're going to paint, first start with your artistic goal. My artistic goal was to test out this road, try out this road of creating painting based on strong local color and making everything revolve around that design concept. And so I came up with that goal, and then I went and looked for a picture that would help me do that. So this horse is mostly white. The background's mostly white or really light. And then you have those blue eyes and that pink muzzle. And I was like, ooh, that's really simple. There's two components in this painting that have really interesting local color that I could even play up. And ding, 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 extra bonus, gives me automatic, really great color theory vibration because the blue eyes are in a family of colors across the color wheel from the family of colors in the muzzle, which is reds and pinks. Not perfect complements maybe, but they're across the color wheel enough from each other that when you put them both in a painting, they'll vibrate together and make each other look even more bright and sparkly and almost like they're alive. So that was the bonus of this reference photo, that I just looked at that and I said, that's going to really, that reference is going to give me many things to have a success. Even if it just was one of those things, it would be a success, but it has several things. It has a light horse and a light background, which I think translates well with watercolor. Watercolor has that transparent look when it's really light. There's a lot of light values in the painting. I think that's pretty. And then you have these two spots of bright color surrounded by a bunch of grays, by the way. And I've talked about that in my color theory video, where I talk about there's a couple ways to make colors look even brighter and more lively than they actually are. One is to have colors that are across the color wheel and the complementary families across from each other on the color wheel. In this case, blue versus orange. And the other thing is to have grays in the painting, because when you put a gray next to a bright color, it makes the bright color look even brighter. So this reference gives us all of those things without us even having to figure it out or think too much. So I don't like to work too hard. I like my reference to work hard. So I like to choose references that set me up for success. And this reference did. So thank you again to Boys in Bristol on Pexels.com for this reference. It was really great. And so that's how you might want to think in the future about how to go about choosing what you want to paint. Think about where you want your art to go, and then find an image that will help you get there. It's really helpful. Okay, let's talk a bit about art supplies. Let's get down to some nuts and bolts, and a little bit away from theory and more into the nuts and bolts of the painting process. And so let's talk about supplies that I'm going to use. I'm going to use the number one most important art supply, way more important than the paints you choose. Do you use student grade paint? Do you use artist quality paint, student grade paintbrushes, professional paintbrushes, paper? What's the most important thing? If you have to choose one thing to invest in, paper. It's paper. And if you paint this same painting on different papers, it will look like a completely different painting, which is a really fun exercise. Paint it on Yupo paper, paint it on clayboard, paint it on hot press, I would love to paint this on hot press, and paint it on cold press, and see what you like and what you don't like about each outcome. I am going to paint this on the more beginner-friendly cold press, Arches cold press, 140-pound paper. I choose this paper for a few reasons. One, I just am choosing it for my more beginner-oriented students, but if you're advanced, it's a good advanced paper too. But I chose it with everyone in mind. It's a good paper, easier paper to fix things with than other papers. And that's because you can do scrubbing on it a lot harder than other papers. And I like to use scrubbing to soften edges, to blend edges, to blur edges, to fix mistakes, to erase things entirely and repaint them. I do all that with my stiff scrubbers. So I do encourage you to have a stiff scrubber on hand, or a stiff oil painting brush, or even a stiff acrylic painting brush might work. It has to be stiff. So by the way, all my supplies are listed in rachelstudio.com/supply list. All those are affiliate Dick Blick links. So if you use those links, I do get a little bit of money. And a lot of times it is cheaper to use that website if you do a larger order, and then they'll give you free shipping. And then you will save money compared to Amazon prices. So that's the number one paper I would recommend is Arches Cold Press 140-pound. If I were to do this painting again for a professional painting that was more for me to practice more advanced skills and all that, I would do hot press, because hot press allows finer details, it allows brighter colors, and it makes the paint look more splashy and watery. I don't know how to describe it. Cold press makes the paint look softer and more like an oil painting and more blended. It's like it blends It's much easier, way easier to blend your colors and blend your values on cold press than hot press. So that's what I recommend for this tutorial, is the Arches cold press 140 pound. And then for brushes, my favorite brushes personally are bamboo calligraphy brushes with goat hair. I think I use that in this painting, and I'm also going to use a lot of my silver black velvets that I always use. I use a mop brush that's by Alvaro Castagnet. I don't recommend buying a $60 mop brush because that's what that is. It's also for bigger paintings, but I use it as my mop brush. But you can use the 3/4 silver black velvet oval for larger areas. You can use an 8 round silver black velvet, and then a size 1 or 0 silver black velvet, or whatever brand that you like. If you want a vegan option, I highly recommend the Princeton Aqua Elites long rounds. I love my size 12 Aqua Elite velvet long round. I use that a lot in the white dog tutorial I just did a couple months back. So you can see me use it there, but it's got a really nice big belly, so it holds a lot of water, but it's long, so it has a nice tip, and it's completely vegan. So I would recommend those if you want to go the vegan route. Okay? That's the most important supplies. And then the rest of the supplies we'll talk about as the tutorial unfolds. But those are the ones that I find most important for success with this painting. I'll also use a white gel pen instead of masking. If you want to learn about masking and using it to create whiskers and saving the paper and all that, go watch my leopard tutorial. Okay, let's see what else. All right. So I think that's all my intro. That was a long intro, but I love this painting. So I am going to put a little bit more energy and time into this tutorial. So thank you for being patient and waiting for me to get it out to you. I don't want to rush it. Beauty takes time. A good tutorial takes time. So I'm taking my time. But let's go ahead and get into the first part of painting. Here we go. For those of you who are super beginners, the more water you add to your paint, the lighter it will dry. You'll hear me say tea consistency, milk, and cream consistency. And what I'm referring to is how much water I've added to the paint. Tea consistency paint has the most water added and results in the lightest colors. And you'll see me tilt the palette and the water runs or almost runs. And then milk consistency has less water added, but it's still pretty watery. So when you tilt your palette up, it doesn't happen perfectly every time, but for the most part, it will bead and maybe drip a little bit. And then cream consistency paint just has a tiny bit of water. It does need a little bit of water added, but when you tilt your palette up, it won't run at all. And when you paint with cream consistency paint, it results in dark, rich colors. All right, here we go with the footage of the eye painting. And what you're going to see me do first is what I call the map. I paint a map of the main components of whatever it is I'm painting. In this case, the pupil and the folds in the eye, and the things that I really need to get right proportionally and in the right spot, while I can still see my line drawing underneath. So that's what you're going to see me do first. And in this particular instance, I'm going to paint wet on dry. That means wet paint, which watercolor is always wet, on dry paper. And you're going to see me use a size 6 round because I'm working in a fairly small area. And you're going to see me do what's called negative painting. I'm going to paint around the eyelashes. I'm not going to paint the eyelashes themselves. So this is what we call negative painting. And next, what you're going to see me do is rub my damp brush, not a lot of water in it because I want cream consistency, size 6 round, rubbing on that lamp black because I want super dark paint for the pupils. All right, so I'm looking carefully at my reference. That's one of the foundational tenets of how to paint Dreamy Realism. pick a good reference and then rely heavily on it to tell you what to do. So I am painting around the eyelashes. The eyelashes, by the way, may be low-key the star of this whole show. So I'm being very careful. When I'm painting eyes, and this is part of my style too, is to focus on the eyes. Not all artists do that. That's just part of my signature style, is to focus on eyes. So I really pay attention to the small little details. So I'm trying to get tiny little tippy tips on the eyelashes. And then I'm painting with almost pure water here, but with a little bit of black in it. That's what we call tea consistency. When I painted the iris, I painted with cream consistency, which means I added just a little water to the paint so that it will dry a lot darker. So the more water you add, the lighter your paint's going to be. But here, actually, what I'm doing is putting this water in here, because next what you're going to see me do is float in, or in watercolor we call it charging. I'm going to float in some cream consistency lamp black because I want it to look soft. And this is another key foundational technique that I use for Dreamy Realism, which is painting on some semblance of wet paper. Sometimes it's just a little damp. Sometimes it's really wet, depending on how soft I want my paint to look. I would say right now it's glistening. So now I'm dropping in cream consistency paint into this area that I just got wet. And the reason why I want to paint this super dark on this wet paper is so that the edges stay soft, just like they are in the reference, and that ups the dreaminess factor too, to have these soft edges. And the best way to do that is with wet and wet techniques. But see, here I'm mapping in the main components of this eye. I'm getting the eyeliner super dark, but at the same time, because I'm painting on wet paper, it's really dreamy and almost blending itself. Foundational technique I use. This is foundational, folks, painting on damp paper to get this soft, dreamy look. You need so much softness and looseness in your work if you want this dreamy realism look to your work, and you don't want it to look stiff. Even on hard edges that your brain scream at you, make that hard and detailed and show that edge. The soft dreamy realism little Rachel on your shoulder is saying, no, just lose that edge, lose that hardness and make it soft. And so now I'm using a clean, damp brush to soften edges. This is also called a thirsty brush, which you can press a thirsty brush onto wet paint and lift it up and make soft edges that way, or lighten an area. So I use thirsty brushes a lot to both blend edges and to suck up areas that I want to soften or lighten. All right, and already the eye is looking dreamy. You can already start seeing it come together. And for me, if there are going to be a lot of tiny details and hard edges, it's going to be in the eye. Why? Because I want the viewer to look at the eye. Okay, so here I'm getting the iris wet, and then I'm floating in a little bit of cobalt blue when that pupil is completely dry. You can do that. And here is where I depart from the reference. And if you have watched my How to Paint Cat Eyes video, you will learn a lot of the things that you need to know to paint any eye. That's how I design my tutorials. So go back and watch some of my other tutorials and you will learn to paint a lot more than just whatever this thing is I'm painting. And see what I did there. On the iris, I made the top third of the iris darker, and my formula is make the top third of the iris dark, the middle is the local color, the actual color of the thing, blue in this case, and the bottom of the iris, see here I'm using a thirsty brush to lift out some color even on the bottom third of the iris So it goes from dark to medium to light as you move down through the iris. I do that on cat eyes. I do it on human eyes, even if the reference doesn't tell me to. So that's where I depart artistically from my reference. Now we're going into the final stage of painting, which is putting on the jewelry. I have a whole video about that. We're putting in the tiniest small details in the eye area, which is the area of interest. But even for painting a larger painting, this is the end stage of the painting where you pull it out of the ugly stage. If it's in the ugly stage, this is where my students often abandon their paintings because it's in the ugly stage, but they haven't done this last step where they balance the values and put in the tiny details. So what you see me doing here is using a size 6 brush. I'm going to use just the little tip, and I'm going to make sure that my paint is very controlled, which means I pick up my probably milk consistency paint with a medium amount of water added to my paint, and then I blot my heel, and I make sure my tip of my brush is in a nice pointed tip, because what I'm going to do is paint a fine line of eyeliner so that I get a tiny little millimeter sliver of white. And if you look at the reference, you'll see there's a sliver of white eyeliner, and then there's a sliver of dark eyeliner above that. And that little millimeter of white glisten eyeliner is the perfect thing to use from the reference that the reference gives us to add a little tiny detail that tricks the viewer's eye into thinking that this is more realistic than it is. So this is where the dreamy realism, the realism part of dreamy realism comes in, where you do a few little areas that are actually super tightly painted, very small little details. You just don't do too many. You just do the details that are important. For me, I want the eye to be the rock star of this painting. So that is where I put the most hard edges. That's where I put the highest contrast, the whitest white of the eyelash, and or sometimes it's the glint in the eye, and the darkest darks, which is the eyeliner. So that's another part of my formula for dreamy realism when I'm painting something that has eyes anyway, is I make everything else pretty loose, but the eye has the tiniest little details. So I'm using the tip of my brush with the lamp black. I'm painting around that little sliver of white line along the whole entire length of the lower eyeliner. And I paint around that. And if you mess up, just use white gel pen or white ink. I love Kuretake white ink. And here you just see me painting with very thin tea consistency paint to put in the very subtle shadows. That shadow that goes up from the corner of the eye, almost giving him a cat eye, that shadow that connects the eye to the shadows of the mane. That's another basic tenet, y'all, of painting dreamy realism. Connection, connection, connection. Find ways to connect different pieces, parts, to other parts, often through the shadows. And in this case, that subtle light shadow going up from the corner of his eye up into the main shadow, that's a way to connect the eye to the shadows of the mane. One way I departed this eye from typical eyes that I paint is usually I connect the dark black pupil to the dark black eyeliner whenever possible. And I couldn't do that in this painting. So I create a place of connection usually with my pupil to the eyeliner, but those beautiful big white eyelashes prevented me to. So later you're going to see me do some scrubbing with my little stiff scrubber, which is another foundational technique that I use in almost every painting to create softness, connection, sometimes erasing completely and restarting. And that's why I need to use my Arches cold press paper. Okay, here I'm using a little bit of tea consistency, very light paint to subtly add a few little shadows to the white eyelashes, because you don't want them a flat white. Rarely do you want anything a flat color. In fact, once I painted a commission of a cat that wasn't a very attractive cat, but he had these big eyes. And so in his pupil, I made his pupil light black, light blue, dark black, even the pupils I made, not a flat. But anyway, here I'm trying to show you the before and after. Before I scrubbed and after I scrubbed, and notice how the eyeliner goes all the way over to our left side of the eye. And it makes the eye look a little bit cut out. So I'm going to scrub that corner of the eye to connect the eyelashes into the horse. And I'm obliterating part of the eyeliner and connecting the eyelashes into the horse. So what I'm doing is creating a light on light edge, which is part of the Rembrandt principle, which is the most amazing thing I learned, I'd say, in 10 years. So please don't miss that video. I will link it here to the Rembrandt principle, coined by James Gurney, who also has a wonderful YouTube channel here. And by the way, let's just talk about the Rembrandt principle real quick. So what the Rembrandt principle says is that to avoid the cutout look, to make your painting look more dreamy and painterly, you want to have Rembrandt edges. And the way that James Gurney came up with this principle is he looked at Rembrandt's painting of the mill, and he noticed that the mill had 4 value pairings between the windmill blades and the background, the sky behind the blades. So he had dark blade on dark background, light blade on light background, dark blade on light background, and light blade on dark background. So that's 4 different value pairings. And in this eye, as you travel around the eye, there are a few different pairings. There's white eyelash on dark eyeliner. So that's light on dark. There's dark pupil on the light eyelash. I don't have a dark on dark pairing, which is the way that I usually get my dark on dark pairing with eyes is often connecting the pupil to the dark eyeliner. If you look at any of my other paintings that have eyes in them, look and see for that pairing. We also have light on dark because of the eyelash against the dark eyeliner, and also the light of the eye white against the dark eyeliner. But we don't have a light on light pairing. And I've also learned as I apply this principle that even if I have 3 of the 4 value pairings, you're really going to vastly improve your painting. And you can use this in so many different ways: on noses, on eyes, on trees, on hills, in landscape painting, on flowers. You can think about the design of your painting and parts of your painting in this way. And they don't all have to have these pairings, but if a few components in your painting have these Rembrandt edges, it's going to make for a much stronger painting. So anyway, I'm going to slow down this footage so that I have more time to talk. And I do that a lot of times in my highly edited $13 tier Patreon tutorials. I will actually slow down the footage to half speed so that I can explain more in depth. And this is a perfect example when I feel like I need to do this because I'm about to use a stiff scrubber. A stiff scrubber is just a brush for watercolor painting that you can use to soften edges. You can use it to kind of erase. You can use it to erase pencil lines. And I'm going to use it to create a light on light edge pairing. So let's talk also about some tips for scrubber success before we go too much further. And that is that for scrubber success, you want to use good paper like Arch cold press, for example. If you're working on hot press, you just use a softer scrubber and things will lift much more easily on hot press usually, especially if you use Stonehenge Aqua hot press. But if you scrub Arch cold press, you won't damage the paper like you will many other cheaper or different papers, and you won't be able to repaint over those areas. So if you're using a cheaper paper, just make sure that scrubbing is the last thing that you do. But in the case of working on Arch cold press paper, we can scrub and then we can repaint over scrubbed areas. So use good paper, wait for the paint to dry completely before you scrub, get your scrubber wet with clean, clear water, and just like the other supplies that I talk about, you can use rachelstudio.com/supply list for a product link. And very unfortunately, as I was painting this My hand pretty much got in the way, so you couldn't see exactly where I'm scrubbing, but I'm going to scrub in the corner, the outer corner of the eye, between the end of the eyelash, and I'm going to obliterate that black eyeliner that goes over the end of the eyelash. I'm going to scrub that away so that I have a light on light pairing between the eyelash and the horse. And that idea is based on the Rembrandt windmill principle to help things not look like cutouts and make them look more dreamy, more painterly. And let's watch this transformation. Also, often when I scrub, I'll also blot. So you scrub, blot. All right, so here you see me getting my scrubber wet, and I'm just gonna basically erase the eyeliner in that far left corner. I'm also erasing and lightening a little bit of the lower part of the iris to make that lower part of the iris lighter. I didn't need to do much though, because it was already pretty light. But here, I'm sorry my hand is blocking the view, but I'm erasing that corner bit of eyeliner right in the corner so that I have a little bit more attachment and a more direct light on light edge pairing between the lash and the rest of the horse, and then I blot. And then I used my white gel pen to add little tiny tips to the eyelashes and a few pure white glistening strands, but not too much, in the eyelashes to give them some depth and interest. So they're, again, not just flat white, but there's some little gray areas. There's some super white strands of eyelash. There's that big triangle of black pupil jutting up into the eyelash to give the eyelash a lot of interest. That gave you a lot of foundational techniques and reasons why my paintings have this dreamy realism look. Let's go back over it. One, I use a line drawing. I use a tracing to get everything perfect, proportionally. I can draw, but it takes hours, and I want to paint. I don't want to draw. So that's a foundational technique number one. I trace to get my initial drawing onto the paper. Two, foundational technique I use is to have an artistic goal and then choose a reference instead of the other way around, and make sure it's a good reference that gives me a lot of what I need as an artist already. There's so much to figure out as it is, even if with the best references. So do yourself a solid and start with a really good reference that gives you so much of what you need to make a good painting. Three, I talked a lot about how to connect disparate parts like the eye into your painting so it connects with other parts. A lot of times that's through the shadows. Four, use a scrubber to soften edges and also create places of connection like we did where we connected the white eyelashes into the horse. So it wasn't a cutout look. So I've got quite a few shorts on how to avoid the cutout look. If you are interested, I do try to jam pack a lot of my shorts with really good best of information. So go check out my shorts. You might be surprised at how much you can learn from them. So that's helpful. And foundational technique, I think we're on 5 now, is to put your smallest, tiniest little details, hard edges, lightest lights, darkest darks in the area of interest. For me, that's usually the eye. If it's a landscape and that area of interest is a sunset or a grove of trees or a house, that's where you put all your detail. If you paint in that style. Another foundational technique that I use is to not worry about color so much as worrying about getting my values right. Another foundational technique that I use, a foundational technique I used in this painting, was to focus on the local color of the nose vibrating with the blue of the eye, and that is the foundation on which I designed this painting. There's other kinds of roads or foundations to designing a painting, but the point is to choose one and know why you are using that foundational road to create a beautiful painting. And I think the most important foundational technique is not a technique at all, and that's why I talk about mindset so much on this channel, is what I learned as a social worker is to have grit. And there's this big study that's looked at hundreds and hundreds of people who were successful. And they looked at those people and said, what is it about these people that made them successful? And they all had such different paths to their success, but they all shared one trait, and that was grit. And what is grit? Grit is not giving up. If you are determined to do something, keep trying. You will fail again and again and again. And in fact, if you're not failing in your artistic journey, then you probably aren't pushing yourself hard enough. So stop stressing out about all your failures and push through them. Use your head, really learn to think and problem solve, and think to yourself, what is it that's keeping me from my work looking the way I want it to? And that might be, maybe you have too many hard edges, for example. So find an artist who doesn't have a lot of hard edges in their work and learn from them. There's so many artists now that you can so cheaply, because thanks to mostly Patreon, you can just join a subscription to an artist who you really admire and learn how they make their painting look more like how you're hoping to make your painting look. So that has helped me a lot too, is to study paintings a lot. I've looked at a lot of art. I have books full of paintings that I study. The Splash series is a book, by the way, that's published every year. It's an art competition that you can enter, but they also publish a book, and now it's in magazine format, but you can see it's full of probably 100 paintings in each book or magazine of just amazing paintings. And you can look at those and see which styles you like. And a lot of these artists offer, you can take a class with them online, or you can go to one of their in-person events. So look at art, see what you like, and learn how that artist did that certain look or style that you're interested in. And you got to really push yourself. Like I did a whole series on where I was painting these loose, splashy butterflies. I did the American flag, and I was really wanting to loosen up a lot. And even though I wanted to, I just wasn't. My work wasn't progressing in that way, and I was getting frustrated. So I really had to think. Key foundation is thinking. I had to think, why am I not getting this? And it's because change is painful. Breaking artistic habits is hard. It's hard work, and your brain is gonna have smoke coming out of it when you paint in a new way that's uncomfortable. But I studied those paintings of Dean Krauser and his loose, beautiful butterflies, and really looked at how he did them, and even copied a few. And I asked him directly for permission to do that, by the way. And he said yes. So I will link a video about that journey and a little bit about what I learned from painting like him right here. But anyway, those are the main foundations that I can think of. I have honestly tried to give you all the main techniques and just mindset tips as well to help you be successful. So I hope you really got a lot out of this video. I really enjoyed making this for you, and I really feel like there's just so much here that if you come back and rewatch this video, you'll probably learn something else new that you can apply to your artistic practice, whether it be actual techniques or mindset, because they are both equally important. Mindset's almost more important because you've got to be curious, you got to ask questions, you got to have grit, you got to use creative solutions. All right, thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear from you. What would you like to see from me next? And I would love for you to subscribe on Patreon for free at www.patreon.com/RachelStudio. You can also join as a member on my website for free if you want to keep in touch with me there at rachelstudio.com. You can come join my community at Rachel's Watercolor Workshop on Facebook.com and post your paintings there. And I try to comment on every single painting. And if you ask for advice, I will give you advice. But otherwise, if you just post your painting and don't ask for advice, I won't give you any feedback other than, this is beautiful, I like this, or whatever. I do try to comment on everything everybody posts. And if I miss your painting, you can message me and be like, hello, did you see my painting? I don't mind that at all. So I hope to see you in those places. I hope to see you online. And until next time, go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody.